Hi, my name is Colin Stanfield, and I'm a executive committee member with the IFP Festival Forum. And this will be our second year collaborating with the Art House Convergence. And we thought, given that we were newbies last year, or many of us were, that creating a chat about what to expect and how to get the most of your Art House Convergence experience. So we're delighted to have with us today last year's keynote speaker, Ira Deutchman. But I want to take a second to introduce the other members of the executive committee here who are on the call. Krista McCracken, who I think you can all see as a ex-VP of Marketing at Tribeca Film Festival. Chris Holland, who I've worked with over years at various places, runs a Film Festival Secrets website and book. And Jody Arlington, who I've known for quite some time as well, and we are colleagues at Silver Docs almost 10 years ago, is our fearless leader. And maybe we'd have Jody talk a little bit about what the program looks like this year and some of our goals with regard to slotting various panels and whatnot.
Great, thanks, Colin. Yeah, so, so as you all probably know from our materials that we've sent out so far, we're a professional association of film festival organizers, and we are about sharing best practices and curatorial and operational efficiencies. And 2 years ago at Sundance, Tom Hall came back from the Art House Convergence, and he's like, wow, 80% of what they're doing applies to film festivals, and we should partner, which we did last year. And we developed this incredibly robust 9 traditional panels, and had a great deal of really fabulous content. But what we realized is that we had programmed so much, but that we're not actually able to interact as much as we wanted to with the Art House Convergence programming, which there was just a lot of counter programming. So taking what we learned from that, and also from the feedback from last year, where a lot of the members said, God, it would be great to really have kind of smaller interactive roundtables and kind of really, have it be a little bit more interactive. We incorporated that in 2 ways this year. So one, we've done fewer programs, but we've been interspersed through and have film festival organizers interspersed through a lot of the Art House Convergence programming, and I'll talk through a couple of those. And then we have created a huge chunk of roundtables on issues that were identified by our members as areas that they were interested in us exploring there. So I'm just going to take a moment in case folks have not looked at our schedule to kind of talk through a couple of things, just to give a flavor for it. First of all, there's a welcome keynote on Monday, first thing in the morning, where we actually do a how to converge together and kind of give even additional details beyond what we're going to cover in this call. One of our panels is called Festivals and Oscars, a dynamic duo, and it's basically looking at how film festivals can be considered a festival or I should say an Oscar qualifying festival, and how you get that and how you keep it and what you need to do. We have one called Beyond the Hospitality Suite, which is really looking at all of the different ways that you can assist filmmakers. We're doing a great legal clinic, which there have been a lot of kind of legal issues kind of happening on the film festival circuit this year with certain small festivals, and so we have 2 terrific entertainment attorneys who have done incredible work both with festivals and individual films, and they're just going to give like case studies and sample language and kind of do's and don'ts and things like that, and it's going to be a great clinic. We're also doing one on mastering the rush line. And just basically how to really take care of your audiences. And then we have roundtables on sponsors and partnership, tech and projection issues, board activation and staff motivation, ticketing solutions, social media and guerrilla marketing, big events with small budgets, mastering the beast, the programming guide. And then we're also going to have a meeting where we talk about the festival forum's future itself and kind of our voting and kind of operational business and governance. A couple of the panels that were cross-programmed with the Art House Convergence are looking at social media metrics and how to kind of master the data numbers. and then also a program on managing your board. So that's just a taste of the festival track and interspersal this and there's the dog. So back to you, Paul.
Nicely done, Jody. Thanks, Jody. And you know, we're going to talk sort of big picture and kind of drill down into some practical aspects of participating. So I wanted to point out for those of you joining us here that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your video window, which you can push to flag questions. And Kristen is going to be kind of keeping track of those. And so we'd like this to be as conversational as possible. So we'd like to take questions relating to what we're talking about at any given moment. Let's hear from Ira. I'd like to introduce him first. It's hard to believe I've known Ira now for 15 years, and I first met him when I was working at IFP in the late 90s, and he is very involved with that organization. This is from his Wikipedia bio. Ira Deutchman is best known as a producer, distributor, and marketer of independent films, but in 2000, he moved into film exhibition as co-founder and managing partner of Emerging Pictures, the New York-based digital exhibition company. He's also chair of the film program at Columbia University School of the Arts, where he has been a professor of professional practice in the graduate film division for more than 25 years. Ira Deutchman is a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He was one of the original creative advisors to the Sundance Institute and formerly served on the board of advisors for the Sundance Film Festival. He's also served as a board member and former board chair of the Independent Feature Project, the board of advisors for the Los Angeles Independent Film Festival, the Williamstown Film Festival, IFP West, and the Collective for Living Cinema, and was a member of the board of Cartem Quinn Films. So Ira has got a very broad experience base, and has been, for me at least, someone who I always felt was on top of the sort of pioneering developments in exhibition, in distribution, and just the film industry in general. Ira's been attending the Art House Convergence for almost since year one. I guess he started in year two. And I would like to hear some of his sort of overarching thoughts on Art House Convergence as an important kind of moment in the calendar year where there is, in fact, a convergence of the industry and the art house community.
Well, thanks for that intro. I have to say that you probably could have made it a lot briefer just by saying old guy.
Didn't mean to out you.
Anyway, I mean, I started going to the Art House Convergence in the second year of its existence. The first year, the way I understand it, was just a small group of people who got together informally, and they enjoyed each other's company and trading information so much that they decided to formalize it. So that was when they decided to make it into an annual event and hooked up with the Sundance Film Festival, Sundance Institute, to make it into a real annual event. So I joined up in year two, and I've been going ever since. And you know, as somebody who has spent the majority of my life working with exhibitors and distributors and film festivals, it was incredibly refreshing to see people actually trading information in a way that was unlike anything I had been exposed to up until that moment, because as most of you know, it's actually a very competitive industry, particularly on the exhibition and distribution end of it, but even in the film festival end of it. You know that film festivals compete for premieres. They move their dates on the calendar in order to, scoop other film festivals. I mean, so it's, it's not without its competitive side also. But what was clear was that the film business in general, and particularly the artier side of the business that's represented by the constituencies that come to the Art House Convergence, were reaching a point of a kind of panic about whether there was going to be a future for film, or if you want to use the broader thing of, just theatrical movie going. Is this something that's going to continue into the new era, the new digital era? And I think that the conversations that went on there are on a number of different levels that make it I think, a really energizing experience for anybody who has a stake in any of these areas. There's the practical level, which, you heard the list of some of the seminars that are going to be done this year, and there's no doubt that a lot of it is about things like best practices for candy counters and ticketing, and those sorts of things that on a very pragmatic level are really important to learn from the people who have done it long enough and who do it right. And by the way, an enormous number of those things overlap into the film festival world also, because you all, when you're running a film festival, you do have to deal with concessions. You do have to deal with how you line people up, how you deal with bad weather, how you deal with ticketing is a big issue for everybody. So those sorts of things, on the pragmatic level, are among the gems that exist, and it's really easy to look at the schedule and say, these are the things where I really feel like I have something to learn from other people. So there's that. Then there's the more philosophical level where people are comparing notes on exactly what their mission is. And, one of the things I talked about in my keynote last year, for those of you who read it, by the way, when you pointed people to that, I reread it. I was sort of surprised. It was pretty good. It's nice when you look at something a year later and you go, wow, it was kind of cool. But anyway, the fact is that there are, just as there are exhibitors who have an easier time getting movies because of the prestige of their venue or their location, or the fact that they have a hungry audience that's ready to view a particular movie or whatever. It's true that the festival world is bifurcated that way also, where you have the big deal festivals where people are fighting to get in, where they really don't have to necessarily bend over backwards to get what they want, that are geared toward a number of different constituencies, be it the media or the industry, or whether it's just their local audiences or whatever. And then you've got a lot of festivals who have very specific local skew, and the needs of those two festivals really aren't the same. But what's interesting is that they are the same as the equivalent constituencies in the exhibition world. And one other interesting thing that I've noticed lately is that a lot of film festivals actually have turned into 365-day-a-year operations where they are actually an exhibitor as well. And the reverse is true too, where exhibitors who have been in the business for a long time start up a local festival, like the Michigan Theater with their Cinetopia Festival, or that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of places where these worlds intersect, and so there's that philosophical world. And then last year, I kind of challenged the Convergence to start thinking about advocacy, because I think that that's really the next step for an organization, that as it gets bigger, and indeed it does get bigger every year, the number of participants increases dramatically from year to year. One of the things that begins to happen is that the group at the Art House Convergence represents a big part of the film world in a way that they've yet perhaps to prove their value to the rest of the industry, but I think it's there for the taking. And I challenge them to start thinking about collecting those statistics so that they can let the world know what a large chunk of the film business they actually do represent. And then to start thinking about the sorts of things that, if nobody else is going to step up and do these things, that the art houses and the festivals are actually going to have to work together to do. One of the most prominent ones that everybody can share is film conservation, which the temptation is to think that in a digital world everything will be available all the time to everyone, when in reality the opposite thing is going on right now, which is films are disappearing very fast, and certainly the celluloid elements underneath the films are disappearing at such a rapid rate that we may lose a huge chunk of film history if things don't happen fast. So anyway, those are just all things that kind of bubble to the surface at an event like the Art House Convergence, and I have no idea what the new thing might be this year, but or if there needs to be one, but certainly there's a lot of unfinished business.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting to hear you outline, and again, it just reminds us of how closely aligned the festival industry is with the art house community. I mean, those lines are really blurring. And in fact, you know, for you just to identify sort of the practical aspects of sort of, you know, the nuts and bolts of getting people in and out of a theater and selling them tickets and whatnot, the sort of mission-driven political wrangling that goes on, positioning yourself in the calendar year, and even the advocacy aspect of really communicating the impact of our collective industry. I mean, these are the top three things that we talk about within the film forum all the time. And I think that information sharing at the Convergence, you know, is happening organically, but it's been happening, I think, for a long time. Jody probably remembers back at the Silver Theater, they used to talk about occasionally when they'd have some high profile talent, sort of an eventivized screening, they'd be like, this is very Silver Docs-like, the way we need to run this event. Mm-hmm. And because they didn't do very many of those over the course of the year, or didn't back then at least, they would talk about it in film festival terms. But on the other flip side, you know, because they're doing programming 365 days a year, their approach to advertising and marketing and promoting was very sort of matter of fact. They did it every day. Whereas we on the festival side, it felt like we had to remember how to do that because we're only doing it once a year. So there's so much that we can then learn from each other. But I have to agree, I think the advocacy side of things is particularly crucial when we think more long term with regard to the protection of sort of our industry and the culture. I'd like also to remind people who've joined us since we started to chime in with Q&As. We won't necessarily jump at them immediately, but particularly if they're related to something we're talking about, we'd love to have that interaction. So please don't feel shy about sending questions over the transom. So Ira, one of the things that you touched on in your keynote last year was sort of the collective action and the sort of collaborative opportunities, sort of less competitive in a lot of ways. Can you talk about some of those in the art house world, and maybe we could have a little discussion about how festivals could be behaving similarly?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I was feeling very, very strongly about last year, which was a complete outgrowth of something that developed over the course of the history of the Art House Convergence, is that we, meaning the art film world in general, exhibitors, distributors, and festivals are part of this as well, have been, in effect, allowing the studios to create our technological agenda. And it's, you know, going forward, because believe me, the current technology that's being used in movie theaters is going to be constantly evolving now. We're not, 100 years from now, we're not going to be using anything that resembles what we're using now, unlike the last 100 years where we actually had a machine that worked that long. And that we deserve a seat at that table because our needs may, in fact, not necessarily overlap with the studios. You know, there's, of course, if the wealthier institutions who are dedicated to preservation of every type of cinema, whatever that may be, are going to continue to just adopt anything that comes along so that they can play anything that is possible to play. So you're going to still have institutions where they're wealthy enough and have enough support that they can have 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter and 70 millimeter and, you know, and every form of digital under the sun and every type of for 3D and 60 frames and 150 frames and whatever. So that's all going to continue. But when you dig one level down from that, in terms of people who don't have that kind of support, there has to be some kind of understanding of standardization so that we all can actually play as much material as possible. And the thing that worries me is that the last time that decision of standardization was made, it was made by the studios without any interaction or any conversation with any of the other stakeholders. So so that's one thing that's deeply on my mind, is to make sure that that happens. One other thing that everybody's really concerned about that I feel like, you know, is a much, much larger conversation is whether theatrical movie going has any future. And, you know, it's obviously we're all dedicated to that or we wouldn't be sitting here. But the reality is that we have a generation of people who are currently not necessarily predisposed to go to a movie theater to see a film and are watching things on all kinds of devices. And already the material itself, the actual creativity is modifying itself to meet the screen as opposed to the other way around. And when you start to see that happen and you wonder, will cinema as we know it continue to exist in that form? Now, I'm a big believer that it will, but I also think that we, again, have to be the ones that with an open enough mind to experiment and to figure out exactly what it is that will cause people to be interested in going to a theater to see something. And we already know that it has nothing to do with the size of the screen, the number of channels of surround sound, the frame rate. None of those things are the reasons why people would go back into movie theaters. What the one proposition that we all have is the idea of this collective experience where we're sitting with other people and watching the same thing at the same time. I mean, listen, last night I went to a screening at the Ziegfeld of Selma, and it was such an incredibly stirring experience to be with 1,200 other people and everybody sobbing at the end. It's like, you know, by the way, there weren't enough tissues in the room to handle it. But, you know, it's that sort of thing that you absolutely cannot recreate in your living room. And, you know, festivals to some extent have it easier than 365-day-a-year art houses, in that if they only have to fill up screens for 2 weeks and they're only showing each film 1 or 2 times, it's actually much easier to get people into those seats because it's automatically eventized. Whereas the art house owners or art house operators are really just beginning to get their arms around the idea of how do you eventize 365 days a year. And, you know, I only recently did I start thinking about the fact that I actually believe the whole windowing thing that everybody's fighting is something that may end up being the Achilles heel for the big chains, but in reality could work to the benefit of the art houses and even the festivals if people would start dropping their objections to this exclusivity. Because in fact, what I think is going to end up possibly happening, how's that for hedging, is that that certain content, if you will, is going to rise to the top through the other channels, and that the stuff that people are going to want to see in movie theaters, they're going to want to see because people are talking about it. And that, in fact, what's going to end up happening is that the exhibition world is going to morph to be more like the festival world, where you're going to see different kinds of programming that are not necessarily showing a movie 7 days a week, 4 shows a day. You know, that model, I think, will end. I think it's dealing with it and being realistic about it is the reason why I think, to some extent, the art house world has a leg up on the commercial world. So, in any case, I mean, those are some of the things that are on my mind that I feel like collectively we have to deal with. I believe that if the art house folks are going to be the research and development branch of the movie industry, which they tend to be because they're more willing to experiment with things like day and date releases and different types of programming, then they deserve to be part of the equation from a monetary point of view as well. It has to be built into the business model. And by the way, that may be bad news for the festivals, because I think festivals are going to have to start paying film rental, because you all are going to be part of the ecosystem that's going to be the reason why this content can end up getting made. So, so in any case, I mean, I think these are all just interesting things that everybody needs to get into a room and start thinking about before the other world starts to dictate exactly how it's going to work.
Well, there's a lot there, and I think some of that is you know, precisely what we want to talk about, and kind of the exciting aspect of having this conversation with you beforehand. I think the idea that festivals collectively, and perhaps banding together with their art house theater breathe-in, can come up with ideas and models around releases so that it's more of a two-way street. I mean, as it stands, particularly in the summer festivals, and that's when I used to work at Nantucket, I kind of felt like there was this whole slew of June releases. They were going to come out immediately after our festival, and clearly that was how they did it. We'd get a call from Ryan Werner, here are the ones we're releasing. They were using our regional festivals in a very kind of strategic way. And I think there's some real synergy that can come from, the word of mouth and free publicity that's generated in a festival that can generate bigger release. But I think, if you were a little bit more tied to that conversation, well, how are we going to do this? Like, let's work with this group of, Northeast events, for example, and is there some sort of through line? But you're suggesting something even more potentially sophisticated, which is some discussion about downstream revenues and sharing in the gate and giving up some of that ticket revenue, but perhaps being part of a larger conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there are movies every year that can't find distribution because the traditional theatrical distribution model just doesn't work below a certain threshold. You've got to know you can get at least a certain amount of money out of it, otherwise it's not worth it. And most of that revenue happens downstream, so that the distributors are thinking strategically about, in effect, how can they use you meaning the distributor, the exhibitor and or the festival. How can they use you to create value for them? And I just think that maybe that needs to be turned upside down a little bit, because some of these films, if you think about it, if the art houses were to get together and just decide to play them, and then they were participating in the revenues down the road, there's one less handout to actually tap into the revenue. Now, is that feasible? Is it likely? I don't know. But what I do know is that there have been examples, even recently, of situations where some older titles, some classic film that there are no 35mm prints of anymore, for example, and where the repertory cinemas that play this sort of stuff actually do chip in money to be able to create a new 35mm print of something so that it could actually rotate among those theaters. Now, I don't know how realistic it is going forward to see that continue specifically, because I don't know how many 35mm projectors are going to survive, and I don't know how the price of 35mm prints is going to keep going up. But that model of linking together in order to create a model that can support whatever exhibition everybody wants to do with it is something that I think could happen. I'm not sure that I know exactly what it looks like, but I do believe that that kind of cooperative approach to taking a film and getting it into the distribution pipeline is something that is within reach.
Let me take a quick second to see if there are some questions either from the participants or other members of the executive committee. I've been making notes here, so I've got all sorts of things I could throw out, but
there aren't any yet posted, but
okay. Well, we'll keep rolling along until we get some questions.
Well, I should probably say, if people do have questions as mundane about, like, hey, which of the two hotels should I book at, and
right.
We're more than happy to answer those types of logistical things as well. So I just want to throw that up.
Good point, Jody. And to that, it was interesting last year. It wasn't until Tom Quinn was on one of our panels that I remembered that there's a ton of distributors at Art House Convergence sort of pitching upcoming product to the exhibitors who are there. And unlike at Sundance, where they're frantically looking for films or trying to, service the projects they have there, there's a little less, they're a little more approachable. So
yeah, I mean, if your hope is to actually, sit down with one of those distributors and have a conversation, you have a lot better chance of that happening at the Art House Convergence than at Sundance. You won't even be able to find them at Sundance. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people use the Convergence for that purpose, which is to grab hold of people they need to have conversations with and actually have a face-to-face. And that's particularly valuable for those people who are not based in New York or LA, because you don't necessarily get a chance to see these people face to face all that often.
Pro tips.
Yeah, Tom actually said that he got all of his Sundance meetings taken care of at Art House Convergence.
And then he could ski the rest of the time.
Or sing karaoke as is one.
Yeah, there you go. So there's always a really good trivia contest every year too, which is
that is very good. Hey, speaking of trends, I don't know if you saw Ted Hope's blog last week about things he predicts will happen in 2015. They're always a little bit.
It's funny. That was last week, because I feel like I read one of those a month ago. But you know.
Well, he has one coming up pretty regularly. But actually, there's three things that kind of jumped out for me that I thought really, you could see happening or make a lot of sense. One was Apple or Facebook or one of these large technology companies should buy a studio. And when you're talking about
should or will.
He said will.
He said will. Okay, will is different than should. Yeah, I think it probably will happen. I think it's funny because it's not likely to be Facebook actually. Because their business model is really about being the pipe that brings people everywhere. They really have not been that obsessed with the idea of controlling their own channels of distribution. I would say the most likely place where it's going to happen is going to be Google, because they're the ones who really want to control their destiny from top to bottom and sort of ace everybody out. In Apple's case, the only thing that prevents me from thinking that they'll do it is that they have a tendency to be very conservative about acquisitions. So that would be a very, very new idea for them. Although there certainly are signs with them buying Beats Audio that they might be in the game. But yeah, that kind of, if you'll excuse the word convergence, I think you're going to see a lot of that going on.
So further down that line, what was the other thing he said? 70 is the new 90. Thinking about film lengths becoming shorter, which wasn't the case with Gone Girl or Inherent Vice this year. But
I think I don't agree with that one. I think that it's true that the younger demographic, I think, is being exposed to things that are that are designed specifically to take advantage of less attention span. I do think that that actually cinema might just head in the opposite direction, which is they have this idea now. The studios certainly do, and I believe that it's true in other parts of our universe as well. That in order to justify a $15 ticket, you got to give people more for their money. So whether that translates into running time or not, it depends on your taste. But yeah, I think the shorter content will prevail in serial form and in other ways. But I just feel like there's I don't see that trend as being mutually exclusive. I think that there will be shorter forms and there will be longer forms. One other point about this, because this is a debate that I sometimes have with people wearing my other hat at Columbia about the future of content in general. There's this tendency to talk about how television has swiped away most of the real conversation about what's going on in the cinematic world. And I think it's a huge mistake to be thinking about theatrical versus television versus YouTube. I think that what we're really talking about is things that are either short, long, episodic, and they find their way to the proper distribution stream, and it's not the reverse. I actually have a hard time with people talking about television because I don't think television exists. It doesn't exist anymore. What people are actually in love with is episodic long form, which actually is more akin to a very, very, very long movie than it is to television.
Can I just interrupt for a second, because we do have a question from Alan Lefebvre. He asks, how does the forum conference help facilitate best practices shared, other than simply presenting them to participants, referring more to the bigger picture ideas that help connect festivals to resources, etc. Is it just presentations, or is there a lot of conversation going on? I mean, I'm assuming there's a lot of connections being made.
Yeah, well, I mean, in addition to the panel discussions and some longer presentations by people who, have PowerPoints or whatever, there are a lot of opportunities for networking. And then there are roundtable discussions on shorter topics during lunches, during dinners, where there's a lot of opportunity to have more substantive conversation. And then a lot of things happen on the fly. I mean, a couple of times that I've been to the Convergence, some idea will come up as a result of one of the bigger presentations. And the next thing you know, there's a group of people during one of the break sessions that are sitting around further discussing that idea and how real it could be, or whether it could be done or not. About 4 years ago, one of the ideas that came up, which was partially implemented, was that so many of the not-for-profit, mission-driven art houses are membership organizations where they sell memberships, and that why couldn't they all just acknowledge the memberships from each other? Meaning that if I'm a member of the Film Society of Lincoln Center and I happen to be traveling in Los Angeles, could I get the same member discount at the LA Art House, whatever that is? And, it's such a silly and brilliant idea simultaneously, because it's simple to implement, and it's never been really formalized, but there's a lot of that stuff that's going on. But that was a direct result of an idea that came up at a panel that then got further discussed, and then by the time that version of the Convergence was over, it was actually in some form being implemented.
I have a membership I'm a member of the American Association of Museums, and it's the same thing. It's this card that lets me into, rather than being a member of one museum, it's a membership card that allows me to go to any museum in the country basically for free, which is awesome. I mean, That would be so great if there was a discount card like that.
And if I could answer that just more broadly on the festival forum, we basically, we came out with programming best practices, and that wasn't something that we just kind of developed on our own or kind of presented. We developed those with our members over the course of, I think it was 2 years that was in development. And then even when we presented the best practices, we're just like, this is the opening salvo, what else, what's missing, or is there other things that we need to add to it? We also do it through case studies. So we will take a festival that is excelling at something really well, and they will say exactly how they did it or what transformation they went through to kind of get from point A to point B. But very much, just like Ira said, it's all very kind of conversational, and what do you need and how do we, figure it out, and then share that with everyone.
And Jody, we have 2 sessions, I think, right, that are really discussion sessions where we kind of talk about the future of our organization and how we work together, and those issues can come up at that time too. Are there any other questions out there?
Does anybody want to know about the hotel?
I do. I've never been, so I would love to hear about what's about the hotel.
Well, it's actually 2 hotels, and they're right across the street from each other. And one of them is sort of a modern ski chalet type place that is looks like something that would have been built by the people who were in The Sound of Music or something. In fact, there's even yodeling kind of coming out of the speakers when you're walking up to it.
And which one's that?
That's the Zermatt.
Okay.
That's where most of the activity is, and it's although I think that for the film festival part of it, a lot of it is at the Homestead. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Homestead is much more down home, just as the name would make you think. Kind of old-fashioned. I think they've renovated it just in the last year so that the accommodations are really quite nice, but it definitely feels more like a resort in the middle of nowhere. The Zermatt feels more corporate, more, like, I don't know how else to put it, but they're walkable from each other, although depending on how cold it is, they have shuttle buses running back and forth between the 2 locations.
And all the meals are included with your conference registration fee, right?
Not every meal. There's a couple that are separate. But what's interesting is that even on those nights, people have a tendency to go to the same restaurants. There's not that many of them, so you're ending up in a group situation anyway.
So I would add two things about the homestead. Breakfast is included if you stay there, and it's a little bit cheaper by like $10. So, and then it's also steps away from the hot springs, where if you feel like going into the hot water late at night, which we did last time and it was fun, it's closer.
We have another question out there from James McNally. Asks, he has a really basic practical question. I'm not able to attend the whole conference or maybe even any of it. I'm working as a full-time volunteer for the festival and arrive on the 20th with no real idea of my schedule for the first few days. Is there any plan to offer any of the conference on a more granular basis, for instance, a day pass or something like that? Also, will any of the content be available online for people who can't attend physically? Jody, do you know that answer?
Yes, pardon the noise that's going on in the background here. But yes, we are recording our sessions, and so those will be made available. In terms of a day pass, we haven't talked about that yet, but it's something that we can explore.
Another thing that I discovered sort of by accident last year was that they screen one of the Sundance titles during the Art House Convergence. So, if that's something that's might be suitable for your festival or for your art house theater, you can cross one of your films to see off your list there.
Yeah, typically they show one film that's going to be in the festival, and then the other thing that they've shown every year has been one restoration of some older movie that is going to be probably just coming out on video or whatever.
Is that what happens the first day in Salt Lake, Jody? I was looking at the schedule. That's there's a screening.
I think it was a restoration that is the first day.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a new thing they're trying this year with some programming in Salt Lake City, sort of on the first day.
Yeah. So I had a really technical question or a logistical question, because they sent the email. I had registered. They sent the email and said, "Do I want the shuttle for different things?" And I said, "Yes, I want a shuttle from Midway to Sundance on Thursday." But it said, and then I could get a shuttle from the Salt Lake City programming on Monday when I arrive to the homestead or to the conference. But I just get myself from the airport to Salt Lake City Film Society. Is that right? Okay.
What is the programming that's going on in Salt Lake? Because I hadn't actually seen that schedule.
I don't know, but I'll look it up right now.
There you go.
There was a thing I could either I could get on the shuttle before the movie or after the movie on Monday. So I think I signed up for after the movie, but I don't know if we're going to have any meetings earlier that I need to be there earlier. You'll let me know. But
I think the impetus, though, was that the Art House Theater in Salt Lake City, they wanted to do something in partnership with the conference. And since everyone was flying into the airport, they thought they'd try and capitalize on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm planning to do that, I think. Because then you get the shuttle to the conference, right?
So their website still says Session A and Session B to be announced. So they haven't announced what the Salt Lake City conference content is yet.
Yeah, it's a little awkward because depending on what time of day you're getting in, you go there first and then to Midway, and then what time is the programming over? Anyway, I guess we'll all figure it out.
Yeah.
Ira, any other pro tips from your years of attendance as far as getting the most out of your 3-4 days there?
Dress warm. Yeah. So make sure that you have one glass of water for every glass of alcohol that you drink.
Yeah, it takes some time to adjust to the
stay hydrated.
So I guess we should say that if you are watching this, there's a code that you can use if you haven't registered yet for Art House Convergence. You can use the code IFP2015. Is that right, Jody? IFP2015 when you register, and you'll get the early bird pricing through December 31st. So that's a little perk here that you may have seen on our website. But so that you can do by registering. You go to arthouseconvergence.org, I think it is. I can look it up. But it's all on our website on ifbfestivalforum.com if you want all the links and all the codes and everything. And there's a link to the schedule there, too, that shows the IFP festival, the festival specific programming kind of pulled out and shown in a piece. So that's just a little bit of time to go before that ends. But presumably you'd make your plans by the end of December anyway.
I think this message could go out to those who will be watching this in the subsequent weeks online as a recorded piece. We are available prior to Art House Convergence in January to respond to questions or thoughts or suggestions that you have about the way that the programming can roll out. So please don't be shy on that front as well. I think the roundtables, which are going to be new for us this year, provide more opportunity for conversational interaction, less sort of chalk and talk, and a little bit more, collaborative discussions. And I think those are some of the environments for us to, respond to suggestions for how we might move forward. So keep those in mind as well. And I think they've been, the idea was to have those take place later in the day so that we can move sort of directly from there until to the evening cocktails, so that there's an opportunity to keep those conversations going into the early evening. And that's certainly, there's lots of that. Evening discussions, fireside chats.
Evening cocktails, yes.
Evening cocktails, exactly.
Good. All right. Well, and just remember too, if people aren't following IFP Festival Forum on Facebook, that's a good place to kind of come and chat as well, and on Twitter. Great.
Yeah, I think we've run our course. Thanks so much, Ira, for joining us today. We're looking forward to seeing you.
Yep, looking forward to seeing you in person.
Oh, wait, sorry, there was one more question. Alan, did you have a question about, are the roundtables taking place consecutively? Oh, Jody answered a little, never mind. Little of both.
Right.
Your seminar, yeah. And the cost is, the early bird cost is $450 for the conference, and that includes a number of the meals. Right.
Exactly. All right, thanks again, everyone. Happy holidays.
You too.
See you next month.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
It's my phone. Okay, I'll mute you.
All right, bye.